Imagine a childhood where your only rule was to be home when the streetlights turned on. In the 1970s, American kids had a level of freedom that is virtually unthinkable today. No constant supervision, no seatbelts, and no tracking devices. The world was vastly different, and many of those normal activities now seem reckless. Here are 10 things kids did in the 1970s that would not fly today. Number 1. Playing outside all day without adult supervision. Imagine waking up on a summer day in the 1970s. Your mom says, "Go play, be home before dark," and you are out the door. No cell phones, no check-ins, and no worries. You and your friends were free to roam the neighborhood, exploring streets, parks, and alleys. You might spend hours at the local playground, running around in the woods, or biking to the corner store for candy. The concept of parental supervision did not really exist. The neighborhood was your babysitter, and everyone kept an eye out for each other's kids. Your parents did not need to know where you were every minute because they knew you were out having fun, just like every other kid. But looking back, it is hard to imagine letting a child today vanish for hours without any communication. Parents today would be in a panic after just a few minutes. In the 1970s, though, freedom was key, and you did not think twice about running off to the park with friends. The neighborhood itself felt like a safe bubble, where every door was a potential place to visit, and everyone knew each other. Your world felt big, but you were never far from home, even if you did not realize it. Today, that level of freedom is unthinkable. With fears of abductions, safety concerns, and the constant pressure to know exactly where your child is, the idea of letting a 7-year-old out of sight for 8 hours would cause a full-blown panic. In the 1970s, though, it was just a normal part of childhood. Number 2. Riding in the car without seatbelts for kids. In the 1970s, a family road trip often meant piling into the car with little thought for safety. No booster seats, no seatbelts for children, and certainly no car seats. If you were lucky, your parents might make you sit in the back seat, but it was not a requirement. The family car became a rolling playground, with kids bouncing around in the back like it was the most normal thing in the world. Many states lacked child passenger safety laws at the time. For larger families, it was not uncommon to squeeze into the car any way possible. Some children ended up in the back of the station wagon or lying across the seat, getting tossed around as the car zoomed down the highway. There was no need for a seatbelt. For many families, this was simply the way it was. It was not until the 1980s that laws began to change, pushing for more child safety regulations. Today, those carefree days are long gone. There is no way a parent would even think of allowing their child to ride in a car without seatbelts, let alone in the back of a vehicle without any restraint. Seatbelts are now a fundamental part of vehicle safety, and car seats and booster seats are required by law for children. What once was considered normal is now almost unimaginable. Sitting or standing in the car's trunk or boot during family road trips. If you grew up in the 1970s, you probably remember the days when the back of the family car was not just for luggage, it was for kids too. Station wagons were popular family cars, and they were the perfect place to fit an entire crew of kids during long road trips. Some kids would even end up in the back of the station wagon or the trunk area. No seatbelts, no worries. You would sit on a blanket or lie down and look out the back window as the miles stretched on. This was totally normal. The back of the car became your space to sprawl out during the trip, or even stand up as you faced out the rear window. There were no regulations to prevent this. After all, who would have thought it was dangerous? But if you are imagining doing that today, you would probably be met with a lot of shocked looks, and for good reason. Today, that behavior is a big no-no. Car safety laws and child restraint laws Now make sure that kids are properly buckled in, with no room for error. The idea of having a child unrestrained in the trunk or back of the car is hard to believe it was ever considered fine. But back in the day, no one thought twice about it. Number 4. Playing on bare metal playground, slides baked in the sun, and climbing high metal frames with no soft surfacing. Ah, the playgrounds of the 1970s. They were an entirely different breed of fun. Imagine racing to the top of a metal slide that had been baking in the hot sun all morning. By the time you reached the top, you could feel the heat radiating from the metal. As you slid down, the burn on the back of your legs was enough to make you wince. But that did not stop you from going again and again. The playground equipment was made of steel, and the only padding you would find was scraped knees and bruises earned while climbing towering metal frames that teetered dangerously high above the ground. There were no soft rubber mats or cushioned surfaces. If you fell, you hit hard, usually on concrete or packed dirt. But somehow none of that seemed to matter. There was no such thing as suing over playground injuries back then. You might get a Band-Aid from a teacher and keep playing. Today, playgrounds are a far cry from those hazardous metal monstrosities. Most equipment is made of plastic or wood, and it is all built with safety in mind. Cushioned surfaces, slides that are low to the ground, and plenty of space let kids play without risking serious injury. But back in the 70s, that danger was just part of the fun. 5. Riding bicycles without helmets, down hills, between traffic, ramps, and all. In the 1970s, riding your bike was the ultimate freedom. Whether you were racing down a steep hill, jumping ramps made of scrap wood, or weaving through traffic, the thrill of it all was unmatched. And guess what? Nobody wore a helmet. Helmets weren't even part of the equation. You didn't even know what a helmet was, except maybe your dad's motorcycle helmet, which you definitely didn't wear. Your bike was your ticket to adventure, and you rode it everywhere, fast, fearless, and with no concern for your safety. Sure, you might take a tumble and scrape your knee or get a bump on your head, but that was all part of the game. Parents didn't think twice about it because, for them, it was just part of growing up. Fast forward to today, and the idea of a kid riding a bike without a helmet is practically unheard of. It is a non-negotiable. Helmets are required by law in many places, and safety is always top of mind. But in the 1970s, you were lucky if your parents remembered to check that your brakes worked before sending you off for the day. Helmets? Not even a consideration. 6. Smoking in the house or car with kids present. Secondhand smoke everywhere. Back in the 1970s, smoking was part of everyday life. Whether at home, in the car, or at a public gathering, the air was thick with cigarette smoke. Parents smoked in the living room, at the kitchen table, and yes, even in the car with the windows rolled up. That thick gray haze was just part of the environment, and it never occurred to anyone that it might not be healthy. Even though it was not ideal for your lungs, no one thought twice about the exposure. For kids, this meant growing up in an environment where cigarette smoke was omnipresent. In the family car, parents puffed away without considering the dangers of secondhand smoke, and the acrid smell was a constant companion. At home, the living room was often filled with cigarette smoke as parents sat on the couch, chatting or watching television. There were no restrictions, and kids sat right next to the ashtrays, breathing it all in. No one thought about the long-term health consequences of this exposure, until later, of course. It was not until the 1980s and the 1990s that research really began to expose the dangers of secondhand smoke. Laws started to change, and by the late 1990s, smoking in cars with children became illegal in many places. But in the 1970s, this behavior was considered completely normal. No one thought to question it, and many even viewed smoking as a sign of relaxation or sophistication. It was a different time, and the health risks associated with secondhand smoke were not yet widely known. Today, smoking in the presence of children is unthinkable. Public places have banned smoking, and it is now illegal to smoke in cars when kids are present in most states. The shift from that time to now reflects how much our understanding of public health has evolved. What was once seen as completely acceptable is now considered hazardous and unacceptable by modern standards. In the 1970s, kids didn't carry water bottles or worry about hydration like today's children. No, we had the good old garden hose to quench our thirst while we ran around, playing outside for hours on end. You didn't ask for a glass of water. Instead, you ran over to the hose, twisted the nozzle, and drank straight from it. The water had a distinct metallic taste, often warmed by the sun as it sat in the hose for hours. But it was the perfect refreshment after a long, sweaty afternoon of bike riding, tree climbing, or just running around with your friends. Nobody thought twice about drinking from the hose, even though it was exposed to all kinds of dirt, bugs, and who knows what else. The hose was practically part of the playground equipment, as important as the swings or the tree fort. You could spray your friends with it, or if you were really lucky, you could make a makeshift water fountain by spraying it at your mouth while tilting your head back. Looking back, it seems crazy that no one questioned the cleanliness of the water. Today, we carry reusable water bottles everywhere, and parents often encourage their kids to stay hydrated with clean, filtered water. The idea of drinking from a hose now seems unsanitary, especially when we consider potential contaminants that could be lurking in the pipes or on the nozzle. Of course, in the 1970s, there were few concerns about bacteria or chemicals that might have been inside the hose. Parents weren't overly worried about the water's quality. They were more focused on making sure you stayed outside as long as possible, away from the television. The garden hose was the original neighborhood drinking fountain, and as long as you didn't mind the rubbery taste, it was good enough. Number 8. Wandering into building and construction sites as playgrounds. Half-built houses, piles of timber and bricks. Kids in the 1970s had a very different relationship with construction sites. No fences, no warning signs, and definitely no security guards. If there was a construction site near your neighborhood, it quickly became a playground. Abandoned building sites and new developments were often left completely unsecured, making them perfect places for kids to explore. You could wander into half-built houses, climb on stacks of timber and bricks, or carefully navigate narrow scaffolding like a seasoned tightrope walker. The danger was obvious, but it was part of the fun. You could spend hours exploring, building forts in unfinished houses, or pretending to be a construction worker as you climbed to the top of a pile of materials. There were risks involved: rusty nails, broken glass, and falling off unfinished walls, but they only added to the excitement. A few scrapes and bruises were nothing to be concerned about. It was just part of being a kid. Parents, too, seemed to take the danger in stride. As long as you were not getting into too much trouble or disrupting the work, they did not mind. After all, this was a great way to keep kids busy while the adults took care of their own tasks. Today, construction sites are heavily guarded with security fences, warning signs, and cameras. One injury could lead to a lawsuit that could shut down a whole project. It is almost unimaginable now to think that kids were encouraged to wander into construction zones unsupervised. But back in the 1970s, it was a normal part of childhood adventure. Modern parents would be horrified if their children played in such dangerous areas. But back then, it was just part of the neighborhood. Number 9. skipping sunscreen and hats on long, sunny beach or yard days. If you spent a summer day outdoors in the 1970s, you were probably going to get sunburned, and that was just part of summer. Sunscreen was something you used only if you happened to remember to bring it, and even then, it was often a thick, greasy lotion that left your skin feeling more like an oil slick than protected. There were no sun protection factor ratings, no 50+ protection, and certainly no claims about blocking harmful ultraviolet rays. You just spent your day outside, and if you got sunburned, well, that was proof you had a good time. Kids would run around in the yard, at the beach, or playing sports, and as long as you had your swimsuit or shorts on, that was all the protection you needed. Hats were not a common accessory, and wearing one for sun protection seemed a bit silly. If you burned, your mom might slap some calamine lotion or aloe vera gel on your red skin, but that was about all the relief you would get. Back then, sunburns were a badge of honor, proof of all the outdoor fun you had. But in today's world, things have changed dramatically. We now know the dangers of overexposure to the sun and the long-term consequences of skin damage, including skin cancer. Sunscreen is now a must-have, and hats, protective clothing, and sunglasses are all part of the package. Back then, the idea of sun protection was almost laughable. But today we have learned that a day in the sun without proper care could be much more harmful than we once thought. If you were to let a child play outside all day without sunscreen today, parents would be up in arms, and rightly so. Bonfire night in the 1970s was an event that kids eagerly anticipated. The sky would light up with fireworks, and the loud bangs of bangers could be heard echoing through neighborhoods. But here is the thing: kids were handling these fireworks. There was no minimum age for purchasing fireworks at corner stores, and no identification required. Kids as young as 8 or 9 would often buy sparklers, rockets, or firecrackers, and the only supervision involved was a parent watching from the doorway, occasionally wincing but never really intervening. The backyard was the battleground. You would light a jumping jack and watch it shoot off into the night air, sometimes flying in unexpected directions, narrowly missing your friends or hitting a nearby fence. Roman candles were aimed from milk bottles, and rockets were launched with little regard for where they might land. Firecrackers went off in puddles, bushes, or even in the neighbors' trash bins. It was dangerous, reckless, and completely normal. Injuries were an inevitable part of the fun. Burns, singed hair, and the occasional lost finger were part of the yearly ritual, but nobody thought twice about it. Fireworks were just another part of the freedom and adventure of childhood. Today, however, fireworks are much more regulated, and the idea of kids handling explosives without serious adult supervision would be a legal nightmare. Parents now have strict rules around fireworks, with many areas requiring permits or limiting access to licensed professionals. What once seemed like a fun, rebellious act is now seen as highly dangerous. But back in the 1970s, kids learned about fireworks the hard way, and the bigger the explosion, the better the night. There you have it, 10 wild glimpses into childhood in America in the 1970s, when rules were looser, supervision was minimal, and the world felt like a giant playground. If you enjoyed this nostalgia trip, hit subscribe for more throwback culture deep dives and drop a comment below. Which of these would you dare do today, or wish you still could? Let's chat.